Support for WUWM podcasts comes from University School of Milwaukee, fulfilling a values-based mission of developing learners, fostering leaders, and preparing citizens for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. More information at usm.org/mission.
From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Joy Powers.
And I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Today we are in front of a live audience at Forest Home Cemetery on Milwaukee's South Side.
We'll be joined on stage by historian John Gerda to learn all about the origins of Forest Home.
Then we'll learn about the hundreds of trees and plants that call the cemetery home and the bees who help keep them pollinated.
Plus, we'll explore the history of the Holler House, a nearby tavern that boasts the oldest sanctioned 10-pin bowling alley in the nation.
All that's coming up on Lake Effect. But first, here are today's headlines. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski.
And I'm Joy Powers. Thank you so much for joining us. We're in front of a live audience at Forest Home Cemetery on Milwaukee's South Side.
Forest Home is the oldest cemetery here in Milwaukee. This year, it's celebrating its 175th anniversary. In that time, the cemetery has become the resting place of some of Milwaukee's most well-known residents, as well as a community gathering space where Milwaukeeans of all stripes come to connect with the landscape and our shared past.
And perhaps no one is as familiar with the history of this place as Milwaukee's own John Gerda. John literally wrote the book on it called Silent City, A History of Forest Home Cemetery, which was recently reissued. John, thank you so much for being here with us.
Glad to be here and above ground.
We are all glad for that. So let's go back to the 1850s here in Milwaukee. What were cemeteries like at that time?
There was no such thing as eternal rest back in those days. Milwaukee is a city on the move, very fluid population. People did die, but the city was growing like crazy. So you have, in many cases, cemeteries would a road would go through and they'd pile the bones on the wayside. So there was no respect for the dead. There was one cemetery, Milwaukee Cemetery, on the south rim of the Menominee Valley, and the Milwaukee Sentinel did kind of a pretty grisly account of how there were pigs rooting in the freshly made graves there. So it was kind of a horror show. It was Halloween, all year round. So Forest Home Cemetery begins back in 1850 as a means of dignified and permanent burial, for all the people of the city.
Yeah, so from horror show to Forest Home, let's talk about how Forest Home was first established here. How did it come about?
St. Paul's Episcopal Church, one of the larger, gorgeous church up in Yankee Hill. And that was kind of where the Anglo-Saxons lived, the WASPs, back in those years. And they were pretty much the people who ran the community back in those years. So these were influential, affluent folks. And they had a vision of what they called a cemetery for the city. And you kind of underline those words. They said, we could have made this just for Episcopalians. We decided to make it for everybody. They also said they wanted to make it a monument to the taste and liberality of Milwaukee. So they wanted something kind of a cut above. So from the very get-go, from back in 1850, they were saying this is for everybody.
And even before Forest Home, this area is where people were buried specifically for ancient burial mounds. Did that have an influence in the decision to create a cemetery here?
This had the largest concentration of mounds in Milwaukee, 50 mounds in this area. And right across Lincoln Avenue was something called Indian Fields, and that was the largest site of agricultural production for the Native Americans here. The corn ground, they didn't do rows, they did mounds. So there are hundreds of mounds in this area, and the whole area north of here especially there weren't any trees. They'd all been girdled and knocked down, cleared for agricultural use. So this was a native site of some importance. The whites did not care. They ran roads, they plowed up all the mounds. So there was an intaglio mound here just behind the chapel in the effigy of a panther, which was very unusual, and that got replaced, by graves. But there were some mounds here. These go back to between roughly 1400 and 1200 AD. This was just discovered in the last year or two. There are a couple of surviving mounds, on the west side of the cemetery. And if you look at it, the designers laid out the graves so they'd be circular around that mound. So they knew it was there and they preserved it. So there was at least at least an idea, to preserve some of these. But more basically, this was not, people didn't say, oh, natives buried here, let's do the same thing. It was more, the fact that it was on the Janesville Plank Road, was much more important. And even more important, the land had been owned by the family of a former rector of St. Paul's. So there was kind of an inside connection. And Janesville Plank Road was the main travel road to the southwest. It's now Forest Home Avenue.
Very nice. Now, as you mentioned, although the cemetery was founded by St. Paul's Episcopal Church, it's always been open to people of all faiths. How has that decision really shaped what the cemetery has become for the community?
I think it made it a cemetery of choice for Milwaukeeans of all backgrounds. So the Yankees at St. Paul's were largely British in background. A lot of Germans are buried here. Poles, Italians, Irish, they're Catholic, so they're someplace else. This was very much a Protestant cemetery. But you have people like Ezekiel Gillespie, who was a pioneer in the black community, a civil rights leader. You have a wide variety of German establishment types, so it really became kind of a melting pot in a lot of ways, a burying pot of Milwaukee's best and people who were of much more modest means.
Now, Forest Home has thousands of residents, including many leaders of industry such as Milwaukee's beer barons. So which barons can be found here in the backyard?
One of my favorite places here is Brewer's Corners. It's kind of on the central east portion of the cemetery. And I don't think it happened by design, and it certainly was not zoned that way. But you have the biggest monument on the grounds, which is Valentine Blatt, the Blatts family's monument, 500 tons of granite. So it's just a huge facility. And right across from Blatts, you have the Pabst family plot, and right across from them, you have the Schlitz-Eline family plot. So Schlitz, Pabst, Blatts, it's like a South Side street corner. Neon signs kind of like blaring their brands.
They got to keep an eye on each other.
They do. Yeah, it's interesting because they were fierce competitors in life, but they also belonged to the same clubs. Their kids married each other, and in death, they are sharing an intersection.
With that kind of in mind, as a historian, cemeteries, of course, hold a lot of meaning for your work. History is largely about the people who make it, and so many of them in Milwaukee are here at Forest Home. What is it like for you exploring the cemetery?
If you're interested in Milwaukee history, what you have here is a who was who of Milwaukee history, going way back to the pioneer years. And when I was working on the Silent City book for the first time, it's more a booklet than a book. It's a little under 100 pages. So I did that back in 2000 for the 150th, and repeat business 25 years later, did it for the 175th. But one of the real pleasures was I walked every third row of the entire cemetery, because you could sort of see both sides, looking for prominent people, interesting epitaphs, interesting monuments. And just the weight of the past here is so profound that you can't help but kind of be impressed by kind of all the layers of Milwaukee's past that are here. So it's kind of there's no more historic spot in Milwaukee for sure. Things happened that were more historic, but this is where the players ended up.
Now, some of the players have those massive granite monuments, like you said, and there's other more modest gravestones here. What kind of different kinds of communities are represented here in the cemetery?
In the early years, it was pretty mixed, European, but kind of you could have a German next to a Yankee. In more recent years, you have, among other things, the island and the lagoon is owned by a Hmong burial association. And along 20th Street, along the east side of the cemetery there's something called Muslim Gardens, just north of an area that is dominated by a statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So Spanish, it's all here. So you have this incredible variety. You have more recent groups as well as the old ones.
Very nice. Now, when you think about Forest Home with the thousands of residents that are here, who are some of your favorite people, maybe characters, who are buried here?
Boy, you have Frank Lloyd Wright's second wife. Not sure a favorite, but she's by herself. She's sort of sad, you know. She kind of has her own grave on her own. My favorite resident here by far would be Frank Zeidler, you know, who was a hero of mine, the last socialist mayor of Milwaukee. And he's next to a cenotaph of his brother Carl, who died at sea in World War II. Cenotaph, not monument to somebody who's not here. So the Zeidler family has a plot here, and all the George Walker. When I was first starting history back in the early 70s, I began as kind of a South Side chauvinist. My first 8 years were about 6 blocks from here. You know, so this was a cemetery that scared the bejeebers out of me when I was a little kid. So I had a long association. But George Walker, I remember making a pilgrimage to his grave because he was the founder of Milwaukee South Side. And now, you know, acid rain, climate change, you know, it's hard to read, you know, the inscription on his tombstone, but quite modest. And then across the road, you have Byron Kilbourne, who was actually buried in Jacksonville, Florida, and he was repatriated back here in 1998. So he has a much nicer tombstone. And Solomon Juneau, the third guy, he's in Calvary Cemetery because he's Catholic. But you've got, you know, there are 26 mayors here. You know, so you've got kind of a caucus, you know, of Milwaukee's past political leadership.
Maybe the one of the most peaceful caucuses there ever was. Now, as a self-proclaimed future resident of the cemetery, what do you hope the future of Forest Home looks like, and what went into your decision to do that?
Several years ago, my wife and I acquired lots in the Prairie Rest, which since 2008 has been green burial. And what I've said that I was left cold by the idea of embalming and couldn't warm to the idea of cremation. So we'll end up in Prairie Rest, pushing up daisies or bergamot or, you know, some other kind of prairie plant. And I hope it's the same as it is today, you know, kind of this very democratic, small d, you know, repository final home, you know, for people who are interested in history and part of the foundation of Milwaukee. So it's something it was sort of the obvious choice, you know, for me especially.
All right. Well, John Gerda is a historian and author of many books on Milwaukee, including Silent City, A History of Forest Home Cemetery. John, thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge.
My pleasure.
Coming up, we're exploring the grounds of Forest Home with the people who know it best. That's next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.
You're listening to Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski.
And I'm Joy Powers. Among the many residents of Forest Home Cemetery, there are some that stand taller than the rest. We are talking, of course, about the trees. Forest Home isn't just a cemetery, it is also an arboretum, home to more than 100 varieties of trees. Walking through the cemetery in spring or summer, you'll be greeted by a wide array of foliage and bountiful greenery.
Sally Kubley knows all about it. Kubley is a member of Forest Home's Preservation Board of Directors, and she leads tours all about the cemetery's trees. She joins us, along with Paula Lovo, the internship educator at Teens Grow Greens, which helps care for the green spaces here in Forest Home. Paula, Sally, thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So, as we just learned a little bit about, even from its inception, Forest Home wasn't just intended to be a place of rest and mourning. So, can you talk a bit about how this space was designed to be a place for urbanites to reconnect with nature?
Sure. So it was one of Milwaukee's first landscaped places in 1850. Increase Lapham, who's considered Wisconsin's first naturalist, landscaped Forest Home. He took his inspiration from Mount Auburn, Garden Cemetery in Boston, Massachusetts. And when you do come and wander the grounds, you'll see none of the streets are on a grid. They're winding, curving. Little hills were left in place. There are water features like ponds and fountains. So it's Victorian Garden Cemetery.
Yeah, because parks weren't really
No,
prevalent,
so
right? They weren't a thing.
fascinating fact, Forest Home was here before the Milwaukee County Park System. So people used to come here to picnic, which is kind of unusual today, but they did. And again, it was this green space. It also fit in the rural cemetery movement, which was let's mourn people in nature among beauty. John Gerda had mentioned the sanitary conditions in Milwaukee, and people wanted to move cemeteries out. So you can see old little cemeteries next to churches in Milwaukee, but this was the first time in Milwaukee they moved it far out, and largely for sanitary reasons.
That makes sense, given what we now know about cemeteries at that time. Now, one of the amazing things that I think everyone is struck by when they come to the cemetery are the many beautiful trees. There are hundreds of different types of trees here. How did that evolve over time? Was that something that was really from the start a priority, or is this something that later became important?
No, as early as I've got the date here, 1895, Forest Home purchased over 1,000 trees. And I wanted to give you the right makeup here. 200 elm, 200 sugar maples, 200 silver maples, 200 box elder, and 200 basswood. And we haven't had another planting as large as that since. However, we're currently working with Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District through a grant, and in the next few years we'll have 500 new trees. And that's part of a water mitigation flood prevention plan.
You mentioned some of the first species planted here. What are some of the lesser known kinds of trees that you can find in Forest Home?
Well, I'm always learning a new one, and one of our staff members told me about a little ornate tree right behind the church, and it's a hawthorn. And it's a special tree because it has those little thorns and beautiful red berries, and it has some Celtic mythology behind it. Apparently the Irish felt that the tree was inhabited by spirits, and it wanted to protect people. And very interestingly, it's right outside what was our first crematorium. So kind of interesting.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's more than just a handful, but what are some of the oldest trees here in the cemetery that you know about?
Yeah, we're really proud of our state champion tree, and that's a designation from the DNR, Department of Natural Resources. It's out to the east of here, a very large swamp white oak. And a swamp white oak has a nickname of overcup oak. Instead of a cute little acorn with a hat, this has a cap that covers most of it, and it almost looks furry. It's a state champion tree, meaning the DNR has identified it as being one of the largest of its kind in the state. 74 feet tall, and these trees can live up to 200 years.
Now, one of the amazing things about walking through Forest Home is if you are looking at the trees, you'll often be greeted by these small signs that tell you which type of tree you're looking at. Very helpful. But if you don't see the sign, or if you just kind of want to figure out how to identify different trees, what are the different things that you look for when you're trying to identify what tree is what?
Yeah, so we do have more than 100 tagged trees, and we are a level 2 accredited arboretum, so you can find all of the tagged numbers on our website, so that's one way. But yes, there are lots of ways to identify trees. Are they deciduous? Are they conifers? That's a first breakdown. Then you can look at so many things: the size of a tree, the bark, the leaves. Just with leaves alone, the shape, the edges, how they're arranged on a stem. There are those books, for tree identification books, which are fun. You can kind of walk through, is it this or that? But of course, today there are many apps. People can take a photo of a leaf and find out the name of the tree.
Now, Paula, to bring you into this, can you tell us a bit more about Teens Grow Greens and who you are and the work that you do?
Yeah, Teens Grow Greens is a nonprofit organization that provides teens transformative experiences that cultivate belonging, life skills, and connections to opportunities in leadership. And I'm an internship educator, so we have 2 different programs, internships and apprenticeships. They're all paid, and that also includes topics and themes like horticulture, marketing, entrepreneurship, food sovereignty, culinary training, a lot of opportunities for teens while getting paid.
Very nice. Now, I have definitely seen teens grow greens around town at different events, but I was interested to know that you also work with Forest Home Cemetery. How did Teens Grow Greens get involved with the cemetery?
Yeah, so about 3 years ago, Forest Home Cemetery contacted us for potential partnerships. And so that started off with our horticulture team, working with Molly, who's a superintendent here, on learning about garden beds and how to design that. And so they were paired up, created these designs, and then the winning design was able to actually bring it to life here at the cemetery, right across from the chapel. And then from then, I also bring my interns here to learn about the history, all the programs that Forest Home Cemetery offers, and also non-traditional green jobs.
I'd love to learn more about those non-traditional green jobs, but I first want to know, were your interns nervous about working at a cemetery? What were your conversations like? We're like, hey, we got a new opportunity, guess where it is?
Oh yeah, no, their first question was, are we digging out? And I said, maybe, no. I said, let's check it out. This is a space that's in our neighborhoods for a lot of us. You're connecting it always to like grieving and right death. Let's see what is there to offer. And like thinking back to non-traditional green jobs, what does landscaping or land stewardship look like in a different kind of way?
So what does Teens Grow Greens do inside of Forest Home?
Yeah, so the maintaining of the garden beds that they worked alongside with Molly, but also we've been able to do a lot of programs. So our field trip starts here in the chapel. They get to hear a little bit about the history of Forest Home Cemetery, and then we engage in a program. We've done trees along with Sally, learning about all the trees that are here in the cemetery, but then also birding and bees. And so for some of my teens, this might be the first time they're birding and being able to identify which birds are in the trees, and then also the bees and the critters that inhabit the space, and even get to try some of the honey and how it changes according to season and the tree that it's being tapped from.
Very nice. Now, of course, Forest Home Cemetery has beautiful green spaces, but it's also, a very sacred space. What do you think the benefit of having teens and young people caring for this kind of communal sacred space, what do you think that is?
I think it's important to remove the stigma that a cemetery is only a space for mourning or grieving or visiting a relative who's passed. I think that can look in a lot of different ways. Like Forest Home Cemetery also hosts an event for Dia de los Muertos. And so celebrating our past ones, celebrating life, but then also engaging in the space as another opportunity to be in greenery, right? Either be the canopy in the shade that's provided in the summertime, all the programs that we've been able to experience, learning the history. I think it helps teens reconnect with a space like cemeteries in an opportunity of growth and learning.
Now, you're obviously shepherding teens into these great experiences, but for you, do you have any favorite trees or green spaces here in the cemetery that you love to return to?
I do. I actually learned from Sally about the ginkgo tree, which is over by the pond and bridge area. It's quite serene. It feels like it just came out of like a Monet painting. I think it's, if you're into biking, a great opportunity to bike over into the cemetery and then just take a moment to meditate in the space.
I could add, the ginkgo leaf looks like a little fan. It's a tree originally from China, and it's considered a living fossil because it's been found in stone going back millions of years. Yeah.
As someone who gives tours of this space, when you're going around Forest Home, what are some of the trees that really attract people? What are some of the features that people are really interested in learning more about?
Good question. I think all of them, but I do ask the kids at the end of a tour, what was your favorite tree? And we let the kids certainly pick up acorns and things off the ground if they want to. So anything like that, a pod or an acorn makes it a little more fun. Yeah.
What's your favorite tree?
I was going to say the ginkgo.
What's your favorite child?
Yeah. Also, next to the ginkgo, there's a sycamore, and sycamores are interesting. They have a very interesting bark. Once you've learned the name and recognize the bark, you see it. They grow to be very tall. That's also in the same area near the pond. Beautiful.
Paula, I'm hoping, can you share any great stories that highlight some of the changes in the teens as you're like working with them, like when they're here at the cemetery and they're like, oh, I'm actually excited to come back, or I want to do some things here?
Yeah, they first come a little nervous and skeptical. They still don't believe me that we're not going to be digging graves, which is fine. But after the fact, after they've walked, and I think they always get taken aback by these names that they might recognize or the monuments that are on the gravestones, I don't know, they feel a little bit more curious of who are neighbors here in the cemetery, but also things like birding. I mean, I had a specific teen who was able to just kind of recenter himself and take a breather while birding. And I think that's super exciting.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for joining us here on stage. Paolo Lovo is the internship educator at Teens Grow Greens, and Sally Kubley leads tours of the cemetery's arboretum. Kubley is also a future resident of Forest Home.
Hopefully not too soon.
Hopefully not too soon. Paolo, Sally, thank you both so much.
Thank you. Coming up, we'll learn about the bees that help keep Forest Home beautiful. Plus, we'll explore the history of the Holler House, a nearby business that boasts the nation's oldest sanctioned 10-pin bowling alley. Keep listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.
This is Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers.
And I'm Audrey Nowakowski. For more than a century, Forest Home Cemetery has been a place for Milwaukeeans to reconnect with nature. But this natural landscape relies on a lot of critters to help keep its trees and plants abloom, like honeybees, which have found a home at the cemetery thanks to Chad Nelson and his wife Barbie Brennan Nelson.
The couple are co-owners of Fairy Garden Hives, a local company that manages hives and makes honey. That includes Silent City honey harvested from the hives here at Forest Home. Barbie and Chad are here with us on stage. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Now, outside of honey production, which we will get to, what does the work of a beekeeper really look like? How do you care for bees?
Honey? It sounds romantic when you get into it, but it's like heavy lifting. So I'm lifting hundreds and hundreds of pounds an hour. I'm going through angry bees some days, in the rain, bad weather, getting stung.
Wearing a suit that will make you sweat like nobody's business.
Yes, I'm addicted to very warm weather.
It's like living in a sauna wearing the suit. It's delightful.
Do you wish you had that suit right now?
Actually, yes. I would be very happy to wear the suit today.
What would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions about what beekeeping is really like?
Honey?
I think exactly what Chad was saying, that is glamorous and that it's just this magical little world that you live in, and the bees just flit around to the flowers, and and then honey is just magically delivered to you. And it's not like that at all. I mean, we have, about 100 beehives, and you have to go into each separate box in the hive and look at every single frame. So it's hours and hours of work.
It's about an hour per week per hive. From April 1st to about October 1st. That's usually what I do.
So just coming into your quiet season?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm still in a daze from that stint I did over the summer.
Yeah. So to talk about Forest Home hives specifically, how did they come about? Did you guys ask to establish them, or
It's an interesting story, yeah.
Well, yes and no, because I'm also on the board at Forest Home. So I have a little bit of an in, quite frankly. But I had read an article in the New York Times about Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn and how they keep hives there.
And once a year, they sell the honey, unlike us, who it's available 365. And people line up to get this honey, and it is sold out within hours. And most people don't realize that Forest Home Cemetery is a nonprofit organization. And we're always looking for different ways to fundraise. And I thought, hey, let's get some hives in here and let's start selling honey as a fundraiser. So that's how it got set up.
Did either of you have experience in beekeeping before that?
We were already established at that point. I mean, we've been doing it a little bit, but a couple years under our belt.
How do you decide to become a beekeeper? What did you said, ooh, I should spend a lot of time with insects?
Lots of bad choices.
Well, so we used to live in Shorewood, and we moved to River Hills, where in Shorewood we had a little bit of land, and we had 5 acres of land. And Chad said, well, we've got all this land, why don't we do something with it? And he said, we should either get chickens or bees. And I said, well, we also have coyotes in the backyard, so unless we just want to be feeding the coyotes free chickens all the time, let's try bees. And he's like, well, don't worry about it. You don't get any honey your first year anyways. And I was like, all right, great, let's do it. We ended up getting about 30 gallons of honey. So I said, we've really got to figure out something to do, and thus Fairy Garden Hives was born.
It's interesting where you have your hives. I think a lot of us imagine bees in a more kind of rural landscape, but of course, Forest Home is in the middle of a very urban area. How does an urban apiary compare to what we might see in the country?
Well, don't forget that Forest Home is a beautiful green space in the middle of Milwaukee. And actually, if you look at a thermographic map of Milwaukee, and all of Milwaukee will be red, there will be a little blue spot in the middle, and that's Forest Home Cemetery. So we have about 200 acres here, so we're urban, but not completely urban.
And unlike monoculture crops, or what we call big ag or rural farming, it's not just clover. It's not just alfalfa. There's 200 different types of trees. There's 2,500, I believe, trees here.
2,400, I think, yeah.
So that gives it accreditation of a level 2 arboretum. So the diversity and the regional seasonal blooms are so much more vast than one can imagine, because there's always something in bloom.
Now, can you share a little bit more about the process of how the honey goes from comb to containers like the ones on the table on the side here? What's the process? Break it down for us.
It's about 400 hours before we get to that. But so yeah, you have to raise bees, you have to bring them up, you have to try to remember what it was like last year, and then get all your bees that are very condensed and very powerful to go out and get all these nectar flows to bring it back into these combs. And then you have to go from a second story and bring like 1,800 pounds of honey down with bees in it, or bees stinging you while doing that. And then we put it into some type of centrifuge after hand picking the comb, kind of opening the soda can lids, and then putting it in a centrifuge. It goes through a very small strainer, something like a spaghetti strainer. So the lucky people will get an antenna or a leg, something like that, so you know it's raw. And then it literally goes into the bottle. So a labor of love.
Now that you're coming on the off season, so to speak, and since I don't know much about it, I assume people in the audience don't. You know, what's the process of wintering bees, right? Like, because you take down stuff for your garden, all that kind of stuff, but what do you do with insects?
Well, they stay here on the grounds year-round, so we expand them all spring because one queen lays about 3,000 eggs per day through the solar cycle, and then that starts shutting down. So at this point, they are producing no more babies for a couple months till New Year's. So we condense and we start bringing them down into smaller, tighter boxes because they have to be about 95% filled, and they are a superorganism, so they will generate heat by clustering together, something like penguins in Antarctica, how they all get together. These are cold-blooded insects, so what they do is they literally kind of dislocate their wings and vibrate or shake and just generate enough heat so that ball is 96 degrees year-round. And the neat thing about honey is it's not just nectar, it's thermal mass. And so they actually heat that thermal mass by friction all year round, and they carb load for 6 months without going to the bathroom. So it's a girl's dream, I guess. I don't know. So they use it as insulation, and you have to condense them and make them very strong. Otherwise, they won't survive, amongst all these other problems we're having out there.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in just a bit. I will say I'm very jealous of the bees at the moment. I'm like, if I could just remove these wings and
They don't remove them, they just kind of dislocate them
like
for a
roll
little
back.
bit.
Yeah.
Wiggle their butts, how about?
So you mentioned earlier that the bees, of course, are pollinating quite a lot of things here at Forest Home. What are the kind of things that they pollinate in order to, make honey?
Depends on the season. So in spring, like maples will be blooming. And what's neat about this place is it's the oldest forest that I know of in Wisconsin, maybe even the Midwest, at 175 years old, a mature forest. That's really unique. And their root structure goes down deeper. They pull up different tannins. Some say some of their relatives. There's a lot of things in there, so the flavor's different. So one mature tree is equivalent to 17 acres of agricultural flowers or wildflowers. So it's quite a bit of flowers that they pollinate. And I don't remember the question, so you can cut it out and restart.
Well, kind of playing off that, how do the different varieties of plants and trees that are here impact the flavor of your honey?
Well, it's very different from what we gather at our house because we have a big garden next to it and we always have different plants blooming. And we harvest our honey by the month there. And you can taste what's in bloom in our yard. So for instance, in July, we have a lot of mint growing, so our honey tastes minty. Where here, as Chad was saying, it's all coming from tree tannins. So it has a very different taste from the flowers that you capture in normal honey. So
Now you know I'm going to say it, because all the flowers here are plastic.
not all of them. I think the teens that grow greens would beg to differ, but
I don't know, people are dying to get this honey.
that grown was deserved.
And is that flavor consistent season to season because it's the same trees and plants that are around for the most part? Or
Not
how
necessarily.
drastically does it change? What have you noticed?
We've noticed that what we gather in the early spring, early summer is different from what we're gathering in the fall. And you can actually see the color difference in it. It'll be lighter to darker. So again, as the trees have been blooming longer, as the plants have been blooming longer and the roots get deeper, it gets a deeper flavor.
But seasons aren't seasons anymore, they're more extreme. So this year versus last year. Last year we had just a catalpa tree blooming at one point, and then the next week it would be a basswood. So by collecting here once a week and opening the chambers and letting them refill it, we can isolate those exact nectar flows. But if all the storms collide at once, you'll get, like this year, we didn't get one certain flavor, we had a mixture. So we had trumpet vines, catalpa, and basswood all blooming in the same week. So it's a medley of different nectar flows. And it's kind of unique to watch that over the years.
Interesting. This is a sadder topic, but as you mentioned, honeybees have been facing declines due to both climate change and other issues like colony collapse and disease. How do you navigate these issues as a beekeeper with, multiple apiaries?
Well, in our neighborhood, we've asked our neighbors to stop spraying their lawns. The people that come out and spray to have the really green lawn, we've asked them to dial back on that, and they've really been pretty good about it. And we also have our beehives further back away from the lawn areas at the front of our houses. But just asking people to reduce the chemicals, they're not needed. I mean, you don't need a beautiful green golf course lawn. And we've been working on turning our property back into native prairie land. So that's how we've been working on it.
Yes.
So for your hives here specifically at Forest Home, can you kind of explain the layout? Because it's how many acres, I forget, as we're talking?
It's just under 200.
Under 2, yeah. So where are you setting up your hives? What does your average caretaking pit stops look like when you're checking up on them?
Well, our hives are in a secret location back in the maintenance building. What most people don't realize is that there's actually an apartment above the maintenance building, and there's a balcony off of there. So the bees are up there. We didn't want them on the ground, so in case people are here visiting or going on a tour, they accidentally stumble across a bunch of beehives and they're like, hey, what's this? And then stings and sadness. So we did put it on the second level, which really no one can get at. But as for the whole process,
Production hives are much bigger and more powerful, so you really don't want to have that exposure to some random person accidentally getting close to it, because in the life of a bee, one bee can only produce about 1/12 of a teaspoon in its lifetime. So we have millions of bees here throughout the year. I think the math was like, I don't know, 14 million or something crazy. So we can produce quite a bit of nectar catching at certain times of year.
And I imagine such a high number of bees also helps the green environment and keeping that going here at Forest Home, right?
well, again, we're trying to install more green initiatives here at Forest Home, so absolutely it helps with all of our green initiatives.
I'm not sure there's a downside to having bees here. They're creating abundance and diversity and bringing native bees back. There are 519 other types of native pollinators on this property that no one knows anything about. Not just the Apis mellifera, or what we would call honeybees. That's a domesticated livestock. So they are generalists that can fly up to 9 miles and bring in the native bees back to where they need to be. So we're seeing more gains through people like Teens Grow Greens and other people bringing in cultivars or natives.
Very nice. Well, Chad Nelson is a beekeeper and co-owner of Fairy Garden Hives. Barbie Brennan Nelson is a co-owner of Fairy Garden Hives and the chair of Forest Home Cemetery's board of directors. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thanks for having
Thanks.
us.
Long-time listener.
Over the years, the neighborhoods surrounding Forest Home Cemetery have grown and changed a lot, but since 1908, it's had at least one constant companion, the Holler House, a nearby tavern that boasts the oldest sanctioned 10-pin bowling alley in the United States.
And for all that time, it's been owned by the same family. Tom Hefke is the latest member of the Skoronsky family to take the helm, and he joins us now on stage to talk all about the Holler House. Tom, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I better put co-owner on that Holler House too, otherwise my wife's going to kill me.
For sure. Now, when the Holler House first began, what was this neighborhood like at the time?
It's primarily Polish. If you wanted to stay competitive, Mike and Connie Skoronsky, my wife's grandparents, are the ones that owned and started the bar. And to stay competitive in this neighborhood, you had a draw, and that was certainly bowling. The Polish loved to bowl. There was probably 10 bowling alleys within a 10-minute walk of here, and that's how they stayed competitive, and they supported each other.
Now, bowling in taverns might not be as common as it once was, as you just said, but Holler House has kept up this tradition even today. So can you share a bit more about Holler House and your lanes?
Sure. What sanctioning means is if you have a bowling league, and the Holler House has leagues on Tuesdays, Thursdays, every other Saturday, every Sunday. And the United States Bowling Congress will send a representative into the bowling alleys, and they inspect the lanes to make sure they're up to their specifications. Once that happens, you're sanctioned, and now our bowlers can bowl in city, state, and national tournaments. 25 years ago, probably a little longer than that, we took the Pindex out. They were stamped Brunswick 1904 underneath. So the wood that everybody bowls on is 121 years old. I oil them by hand, and it drives the bowlers nuts. If you bowl in a regular league that's synthetic lanes, it's a whole different ball game. So it's a lot tougher.
Sure. I will say, having reported on bowling a little bit, I learned very quickly that bowlers take it very seriously. Now, Holler House specifies that it's the oldest 10-pin bowling alley in the U.S. What defines 10-pin bowling versus other kinds?
Well, it's regulation bowling. Instead of duck pin bowling with the smaller pins and smaller balls, this is just like any other bowling alley. The only difference, it's 2 lanes. You have to have a pin setter, but everything, the length, the width, everything's the same. It's just all manual.
Yeah, to go into that manual work you mentioned, you oil the floors yourself, and another unique thing about the Holler House is that you use human pin setters, which is a bit of a novelty today. So how does it work? Who gets, punished with that job, maybe?
We pretty much keep a lot of things in the family, and 5 generations, everybody's taken a turn, including myself, in setting pins, but I'm way too old for that stuff now. But I still do if somebody doesn't show up. But normally it's the boys, and then the grandsons, and then the nephews. But we have a few of the neighborhood kids that come in too. We were in Open Doors, Milwaukee, a couple of years ago when I was explaining the pin setter job, and this woman says, "You've taken new pin setters?" And I said, "Can never have too many." He needs a job. And so her 2 sons and daughter now set pins for us on occasion. So it worked out pretty well for us.
How big is the space where they're working in to reset pins?
There's a bench, it's about 4 feet wide. There's a pad that the balls and the pins fall into or bang into. They stay up above the pins, and then when they bowl the ball down the alley, they jump off the bench, get down there, put them in Brunswick racks, and everything in our bar and bowling alley, it's all Brunswick original. It's all over 120 years old. And when I get the engineers from Brunswick to come in and take a look at our racks, they just look at me and say, "How do you do it?" And I said, "I'm really not sure, but it's working." Good German engineering.
Fair enough. Now, for a long time, Holler House was known as Jean and Marcy's Holler House. Marcy, in particular, became a real celebrity in the neighborhood. How did they come to have such a big impact on the community?
Marcy was a real piece of work, let me put it that way. She was a lot of fun. She really was. She wasn't 5 feet tall. She could barely see over the bar. Swore like a sailor. Was always up to something. But she was a lot of fun, and people just come in she'd hold court. And Marcy always said, if you came in more than twice, you're part of the family. And she meant that. It was her extended family. She worked up until a couple of weeks before she passed. She passed just shy in 94. But she loved that bar. That was her domain. She could go away for 4 hours at special occasions, and then she'd say, "Take me back home."
It's been almost 120 years since your family opened the Holler House. You mentioned a lot of the equipment hasn't changed over the last century, but yeah, what's changed? What hasn't changed?
Really not much has changed. If you went down there, we got new paneling. In the kitchen, one of the things we get people from all over the world. The internet really did a lot of wonderful things, not for a lot of people, but in particular for us, because people want to see it. And we've got a kitchen, there's a cast iron sink in the kitchen. People are just enthralled by that thing. That looks like my grandma's, and it was my wife's grandma's. So, yeah. And the neighborhood's changed, but it's a wonderful neighborhood. We get all kinds of great people in there, from celebrities to everyday Joes. We even have one in here tonight. I'm going to embarrass you, John. John Sparrow from the Violent Femmes kind of comes in on a regular basis with his wife, Nadia, and I think he's still sitting in the back. But he's a neighborhood boy, too. But we get people, as I said, from all over the world, and it's wonderful. And we kept the tradition that Marcy had. They're kind of like our extended family now, too.
Well, and I imagine that extended family includes the bowling leagues that have been there. What's your oldest running bowling league at the Holler House?
The Thursday night girls, my wife's team, her and her 2 girlfriends have been bowling together on Thursday nights for over 40 years. Yeah, and they never get beat.
Now we have to ask, of course, we are here at Forest Home Cemetery. Holler House is not that far away. What is it like having Forest Home as a kind of neighbor?
It's really nice. As I said, I get people from around the world, and I can look across and see the cemetery from the bar windows. And when I get people in from out of town, I'll say, do you know who's buried over there? And I'll explain to it, and I'll say, do yourself a favor. Pull in the gate, follow the yellow line, and see how beautiful that cemetery is. But it's really nice.
Do you have a favorite activity or walking loop around here in the cemetery when you need a break?
I walked this cemetery so much that my mother-in-law used to think I was dead.
And on that note, Tom Hefke is the owner of the Holler House Tavern, home
With
to
my wife, Kathy.
with his wife Kathy.
Quit trying to get
With
me in
his
trouble.
wife Kathy. Tom and Kathy, co-owners of the Holler House Tavern, home to the nation's oldest sanctioned 10-pin bowling alley. Tom, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that wraps up today's show. I'm Audrey Nowakowski.
And I'm Joy Powers. If you miss any Lake Effect show, you can find all of our conversations at WUWM.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you to all of our guests and to the audience for joining us at Forest Home Cemetery tonight, and a big thank you to the Forest Home staff for helping to make this happen.
And as always, thank you for joining us on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.